For being here. Thanks for that intro, Jen. And I want this to be interactive. If you have questions, just jump in, let me know. I'm going to be presenting on some of these reference hybrid plant designs that we've been developing here at NREL, as well as, like Jen said, talking about H2Integrate in general. So if you have any questions along the way, just jump in. Do let me know if you can't see my slides. Otherwise, I'm excited to share with you. So when I say we in this presentation, I largely mean other people and also me. When I say John Jasa is presenting and a fantastic NREL team did all the work, I really want you to think about that. So behind the scenes, there's a huge group of people that are doing fantastic work. And really, I'm just highlighting and signal boosting a lot of that really good work. Today, like I mentioned, I'm going to just motivate you on why we're looking at what we're doing and then go into some more detail about these designs as well as the H2Integrate tool. So I might be preaching to the choir here, but I want to start here and then define what we're doing in these reference designs. So for hybrid energy systems, there's lots of different avenues of research interest. You could be looking anywhere between the transmission to the end use side of things. In this work that I'll be primarily showing, we're really focusing on the end uses as well as the creation of hybrid energy systems to fuel those end uses. But I want to acknowledge at NREL, and even within our group, the Wind Hybrids group for me, there's a huge amount of research that's going on in each and every one of these areas. Now, if I think about IEA Task 61, I think about variable renewable energy going into hydrogen, what would be interesting there? The really interesting bit is solving this problem of literally variable energy, how to dispatch it, how to solve the uh, dispatch question to produce electricity, to produce hydrogen, steel, ammonia, and other products as well. So if we really think about the motivational statement behind the work that we're doing here, is to develop this R&D that really supports the idea of finding the best solution for different end uses. Now, I've mentioned a few different technologies, but I want to acknowledge that there's a huge, wide range of technologies that hybrid systems encompass. We could be talking about even fossil fuels included. I love working at the National Renewable Energy Lab. We're often focused on renewable energy, but it wouldn't benefit us to not look at fossil fuels to be able to do an apples to apples comparison. That's just one example of something that you might not have thought was necessarily included in some of these hybrid systems. Additionally, we're looking at production of not just electricity, but all sorts of biomolecules and other useful fuels along the way. So I'll be showing you a subset of the total hybrid energy systems that we're nominally looking at here at NREL. And then lastly, I want to motivate some of the just frankly exciting physical work that occurs. A lot of my work is in the modeling and simulation sides of things. I talk with experimentalists, I gather data from them, and we work together. But those experiments occur right at NREL, which is fantastic. We're fortunate to have a actual hybrid energy system that has solar, wind, batteries, as well as an electrolyzer all on site. So this is part of a large project called ARES. You might have heard about it. And one of ARES' goals is to really prove out a lot of these technologies in a very real way. We're able to do these studies, look at the actual results, record second by second, even lower frequency information about this actual hybrid system running, and then apply that to our simulations and designs. It's a really fantastic site and opportunity, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So all that being said, I hope you're motivated to learn more about hybrid energy systems and what we're doing here at NREL. Let's talk about it. I'm going to discuss some reference hybrid designs. And what we mean by that is there are so many different systems that we could be looking at. We want to be able to say, here is a system, here is another system, and allow researchers at different institutions, allow industry partners to say, oh, I understand what that means. This is clearly defined. I know all the assumptions going into it. We can now do some studies or even research new technologies and integrate them within the system to fully understand what that means. Before I get too deep into the weeds, I want to tell you a lot of the work that I'm going to be presenting today comes directly from a fantastic paper from Evan Resnicek and a much larger team. This paper, thankfully, has been published. It's available in Cell Report Sustainability. I have the DOI right here. But this fantastic paper came out of a project that was really focused on the production of steel and ammonia using hybrid energy systems and focused in a few different locations in the US. I'll go into more details here, but I also want to be clear that the open source reference designs that I'll be referencing in a few different places may differ slightly from what's published in the paper. All of these have been labors of iterations back and forth with the Department of Energy and other stakeholders to make sure that we're representing hybrid systems of interest. So what's published in the paper is going to be slightly different than what will eventually be open sourced. And I'll talk more about that later on. All that being said, let's talk about some of the results from that paper. So if we're talking about why are we making these reference designs, the idea, like I mentioned before, is that we can have off-the-shelf hybrid systems that are useful for very complex and very important industrial uses. I mentioned the idea of producing steel and ammonia. These are huge, huge energy sinks, especially in the US and especially in areas that are challenging to electrify for different reasons. The work that was done as part of this paper really focused on up to 5 different locations in the US for different reasons, and I'll get more into that. But what we found based on this is that off-grid systems, so non-grid connected hybrid energy systems, absolutely can be cost competitive. They're able to circumvent some of the current issues plaguing people who are trying to actually create these hybrid energy systems by not relying on transmission build-out. If we don't need to connect to the grid or have a huge interconnection limit, we're able to build these systems sooner than later. And then next up, again, thinking about the audience for this IEA task, we wanted to prove out that variable energy production assets, wind and solar, for instance, aren't a bad thing for these systems. They're actually a good thing. By coupling them with batteries or even hydrogen storage, we're able to incorporate these assets, account for the variability, and not be stressed by what they're producing or not producing at any given time. And then last, I wanted to highlight some current work, which I will go into more detail about. One, it's this detailed report and designs that are going to be available open source for these hybrid reference designs. And then also, I alluded to this and showed a picture, but the demonstration plans at Aries. I'm actively working with some experimentalists about what it would mean to have a DC microgrid instead of having a DC to AC to DC coupling. What kind of efficiencies can we gain there? Improving out a lot of that. So very exciting times, a lot of irons in the fire, to say the least. Next up, I want to introduce, for some of the reference designs, the technologies that we'll be including. So when I talk about H2I or H2Integrate, like Jen mentioned, this is an open source tool. A lot of the reference designs that we used in the past and that are published in the paper were based on the same ideas, codes, and models that have gone into this tool. I want to highlight both the results and also try to explain and connect the dots between what we're modeling in the tool in general and the results that I'm showing. So on the left-hand side here, we have what's called the H2Integrate process. It goes from model definition, simulation, optimization, and analysis. We're able to not just model the systems, but also optimize or design the different components. Let's say you're trying to size the wind or solar farm, you're trying to size your electrolyzer. Those are just some very quick and high-level examples of the types of design optimization that we're capable of here in H2Integrate. Now, on the right-hand side, I do want to highlight a lot of the cases that we'll be looking at in this moment are focused on wind, solar, battery, going into a steel or ammonia plant after producing hydrogen. So if we really map this out and we look at energy to transmission to the hydrogen production process, I want to highlight these different areas and how they're all coming together. Sometimes we're passing electricity between these different assets, and then also we're passing hydrogen between these assets. If you're unfamiliar with the idea of steel or ammonia production, there are many, many different ways to get the huge amounts of energy required. You might be using an electric arc furnace, which is the idea of using electricity to greatly heat up the metal to allow for steel processing. In the process as well, we could use hydrogen for a lot of this kind of energy transport and energy production within the steelmaking process. And we're advocating for this mixed renewable energy system producing hydrogen for use in this high energy intensity process. So I'm glossing over a lot of the details, frankly, just so we can get to some fantastic results. But please jump in if you have any questions about the architecture of the systems we're looking at or what this means. Now, I did mention before that we want to be able to say we're looking at these hybrid energy systems and they're beneficial compared to the status quo. And in this case, the status quo.
Oh, did John freeze?
I wasn't sure if it was me. Okay,
Yeah,
it was John.
I think it's
Yeah.
John.
We have a brief pause till John comes back. If anyone has questions, putting those in the chat would be a good time for that right now.
Well, I can take this time to announce to our attendees that we're going to be taking a break for the month of August, and then our next one is going to be August 28th, and that is going to be from Meng Tao from Arizona State University on the integration of electrolyzers with solar and wind, so renewable energy resources. John has joined again.
Hey everybody, sorry about that. Thanks for your patience. I think I'm back. I don't know what happened, but I'm glad to be back. I hope my face froze in an okay face.
It was not bad.
Thank you for your support, Jen.
We are recording this session, so you could go back and take a look.
Thank you, Christiane. I don't need to see that. I'm gonna never look. No, I'm kidding. This is great, everybody. I think I was on this slide, and I'm not sure how much of this went through. I think I will start just back at the start of this. Please let me know if anything's unclear. So we're talking about the idea of H2Integrate being useful and allowing us to compare different energy systems, including those, but not limited to, renewable systems, but also looking at fossil fuel included systems, so it's kind of the status quo of these steel production plants. So as I've highlighted here in number 1, if we have the idea of the grid supplying power to the steel plant as well as natural gas, how can we be producing hydrogen for use for the steelmaking, like I mentioned, as well as using carbon capture and storage, or CCS, to help reduce some of the emissions? We're looking at that as kind of being the status quo, or the best alternative way of producing the steel. In the second option outlined in green here, we have a grid-connected source producing the H2, the hydrogen, and it's not necessarily using the natural gas or SMR process. Instead, it is using electrolyzers to produce hydrogen. And then on the third side, we have where, personally, I'd like to get to, the idea of using hybrid energy systems that are using renewable energy assets to produce electrolytic hydrogen, which is then passed into the steel making. So this allows us to do this apples to apples to apples comparison of different plants, show how this third option, this fully renewables option using electrolytic hydrogen, compares to the state of the art for other fuel sources, for fossil fuels or otherwise. I might get ahead of myself here and just spoil it. SMR, steam methane reforming for producing hydrogen, is often very low cost. Especially in the US, it's generally cheaper to use natural gas. We were exploring ways and situations where it makes sense to use renewable energy assets, and we found some great ones. Let's talk about it. So when I mentioned this before, I didn't go into detail about the 5 locations that we're looking at, but there are 5 very geographically disparate locations. Now, I'm from the US, and so when I say states, it means something to me, but I want to just briefly introduce the kind of different areas that we looked at here and why we looked at them. So there are many different spots in the US where it might make sense to produce hydrogen. You could either be using it to make steel and ammonia, like I've been mentioning a lot, or you could be looking at refueling heavy or medium duty vehicles, or a bevy of other opportunities for using hydrogen. Personally, I live in Nebraska. I'm fortunate to be able to work remotely, but I'm always thinking about farming communities. I'm thinking about, can we use hydrogen to produce ammonia for use in fertilizer? That's another fantastic end use, and it just points to the many varied places where energy produced through and using hydrogen is so important. All that being said, the 5 locations that we're looking at in this study include Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, Texas, and Mississippi. Each one of these have kind of different resource potentials from the wind and solar resource, like I mentioned before, as well as immediately neighboring loads caused by needing to use this hydrogen for different industrial uses. So there's a few different reasons why we picked those sites, and in picking those sites, you can do a compare and contrast and sort of bookend the results of these hybrid energy systems. Seeing the best case scenario, if you have plentiful wind and solar resource, what are your results? And in cases where you might have less renewable assets or renewable potential, what are your results as well? Now, this is a fun and dense plot. I want to introduce it. So this is a set of results, and we try to boil down these very complex models, simulations, and optimizations down to a singular bar chart so we can tell our boss's boss about it. What does this mean? The idea is that if we can get the cost of hydrogen production to a lower value using renewable energy assets in these hybrid systems, that's a net positive for the world. This bar chart shows the different cost comparisons for producing the hydrogen using these different technologies. On the left, we have SMR and then SMR with CCS, which again is steam methane reforming or using natural gas to produce this hydrogen for the steel plant. Those you can think about as the status quo. You can see they're relatively inexpensive as well. Then we have different permutations of either grid-connected hybrid energy systems or off-grid connected hybrid energy systems. And I want to also highlight that within each one of these bars, there is a line, an arrow, and then a bottom gray landing spot as well, which is showing how policy affects these results. So in the US, a lot of hydrogen production has been subsidized by the US to encourage the production of different renewable assets and electrolytic hydrogen build out. We're looking at using policy to kind of tip the scale in our favor to get down to lower cost of hydrogen. As we see in this bar chart, that is very evident by making a lot of these hybrid energy systems cost competitive through the use of policy. Now, I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge that in this moment, 2025, there is a large swirl of changes to policy, especially regarding hydrogen, and this work was focused on the policy as we knew it in 2024. So you can take the same tool, framework, comparisons up to the financial numbers and rerun these simulations and analyses to better understand what the current landscape looks like as well. I think I want to highlight just a few more key insights here, which is that often off-grid systems are actually cost beneficial compared to on-grid or grid-connected systems, which may be slightly counterintuitive. What we found was that by avoiding the grid interconnection setup and by allowing us to have just complete control over the renewable energy assets as they're installed and invested in, you're able to get to a lower actual value for the levelized cost of hydrogen, which is fantastic. Now I have another kind of information dense plot that I want to highlight, and it's the notion of why hybrids. I think we could say we could just have wind that's powering an electrolyzer system, and that could be a-okay. It could be not optimal. My background's in optimization. I love trying to find the optimal systems. We're motivating the use of hybrid energy systems here because of the intermittency of some of these resources, as well as the beneficial coupling of providing more firm power to electrolyzer systems. So let me get into this. I mentioned that this is information dense. I'm going to try to guide you through it as well. So we have the 5 different locations from left to right, from Indiana to Minnesota. On each one of these bar charts, we have different values that we're comparing. Anytime you see blue or a solid color bar, it is a wind-only system that is producing this hydrogen. This would be the case of you have a wind farm directly connected to an electrolyzer cluster or system. Then on the right, we have this red or kind of cross-hatched bar, which is showing when you have a wind, solar, in this case, photovoltaic solar, PV, and battery hybrid system, what does this mean for the actual hydrogen production? The easiest way to think about this is if you're a hybrid energy system developer or stakeholder or potential investor, you're looking at, should I invest in wind only or should I buy this battery and solar system, and how big should they be? These are all very important questions to answer because we're dealing with millions of dollars at the utility scale. All that being said, we wanted to show that it is beneficial to have these hybrid systems. Because wind is somewhat intermittent and because there's no inherent storage as well, you're able to get lower cost of hydrogen produced by including the battery. The storage and also the energy afforded by the solar system is so helpful to running the electrolyzer. And let me explain why. It not only increases the capacity factor of the electrolyzer, this second bar chart from the top shows that, where the red or cross-hatched bars are slightly higher than the blue ones. This means that the electrolyzer is running more often. You're getting more output for your investment, which is a great sign. Additionally, by having less variability in the electricity signal going into the electrolyzer, the average stack life for the electrolyzer increases. Without getting too deep into the weeds, we know that electrolyzers degrade more the more variable the electricity signal is going in. If you have a startup and shut down events for the electrolyzer, it also degrades the stack more. So we're able to avoid that, reduce maintenance costs, and increase the lifetime of the electrolyzer stack by having this hybrid energy system. I think it's really neat, and I glossed over the top point here, which is the cost of hydrogen is generally lower when using these hybrid systems. You can imagine if you're a stakeholder or investor, you really want to see that. You want to make sure that you're producing hydrogen at a lower cost overall. And I'm going to wrap up this kind of reference design section with just a few key insights. I think I've touched on a few of these, but if there was a one-stop shop for results here, this is maybe the slide. So I want to acknowledge that the integrated hydrogen costs are so site specific. We looked at 5 different sites across the US, and depending on the wind resource available and other solar potential as well, there could be a huge impact on the cost of energy and thus the cost of electrolytic hydrogen. Additionally, we're talking about the cost of hydrogen storage. I didn't go too deep into the details here, but if you're producing the hydrogen and moving it off-site immediately, that has a different set of costs than if you're producing the hydrogen, needing to store it, needing to connect it up to a pipeline or transmit it in some other way. Obviously, that adds a lot of cost, but you need to account for that and account for how far you are from your end use of hydrogen. This is why we really focused on industrial scale plants, maybe making steel. We're talking gigawatt size plants. And if the hydrogen use case is right by where it's being produced, that's very beneficial. Then lastly, I also wanted to mention the idea of dynamic end uses. If you have a little bit of flexibility, either afforded through hydrogen storage, battery storage, or otherwise, you get a lot better results by being able to smooth out the different power production profiles, especially for going into your electrolyzer. And I didn't touch on this too much, but the idea of having seasonal storage as well in the summer when the sun is plentiful and solar energy is abound, you're going to get different results than in the winter. And accounting for these variations and accounting for that operation throughout the year is a very important problem. Let's talk more about H2Integrate, the tool that we've been using to do a lot of these reference hybrid designs and more. So, as Jen mentioned, I am one of the main developers alongside Chris Bay in a fantastic team at NREL that is developing H2Integrate. H2Integrate is a tool that was formerly known as GreenHEART. We've rebranded alongside the new administration to open up what we're looking at in a more broad way. It is a tool that allows us to look at hybrid energy systems of many different types. And let me talk about that. I'm also going to talk about how we're doing that in the applications, as well as a little bit of code-based discussion. I'm not going to show you code, don't worry, but I'm going to tell you that it's a Python-based tool. What we do here is we have it set up in NASA's OpenMDAO framework, which is a multidisciplinary analysis and optimization framework that allows for modular setups of systems, and then you can connect those together and more easily pass information and perform design optimizations together. We're primarily looking at the production of electricity, ammonia, steel, methanol, and other commodities, but you as a user could get H2Integrate, look at the models that exist there, follow some of the documentation that we've developed, create your own model, integrate your own model into an existing hybrid system or a brand new one, and see how your technology performs within that larger system. Additionally, something that's really, really neat about H2I that I don't see all tools doing is that it has front to back cost and financial calculations. So H2I is able to do 8760 per hour calculations across a year, but it also takes those performance calculations, the actual outputs from the physics, uses cost information as well, passes this to a financial module, and is able to compute the levelized cost of electricity, hydrogen, and many other key metrics that help inform investments in these areas, as well as just understanding how effective these different hybrid plants are at what we're trying to do. This is a really fun slide, and let me introduce it. There's a lot going on here as well. This is a slide that I actually didn't make. Somebody from DOE, Jesse Adams, at the Hydrogen Fuels Technology Office, made this and shared it with us to help share their vision for what H2I is doing. And this is a little bit funny. It does say GreenHEART here because we're working through a name change. Let's talk about this. DOE, the Department of Energy, sees H2I as useful across many different offices. On the left-hand side, we have information coming in. So HFTO, the Wind Energy Technology Office, WEDO, solar, nuclear, and many other offices are giving information about the technologies that they're developing, the efficiencies there, any policies or tax credits, and upcoming targets for 2030, 2035, things like that. We're able to take in that information, input it into H2I, understand what it means for the modeling, run these different simulations under different scenarios, and get really valuable information out. If you're any one of these individual DOE offices, you don't necessarily have the capability to look outside of just your main focus, as well as coupling those to other focuses easily. H2I allows that to happen. And so we're able to run these different simulations, take a look at the levelized cost of different commodities that are coming out of H2Integrate, and inform these offices on where to invest, where it makes sense, where we should be looking to develop some of these hybrid energy systems. And I mentioned that I didn't make this, I did adapt the slide. I really enjoy it because for me, it shows, my gosh, our impact through H2I is not only seen at the DOE level, which is fantastic, but also very broad. It's able to help out many different offices, which in this moment in history is useful because we're trying to do an all of the above energy approach where many different generation sources will be useful for the US and the world. I now want to highlight some fantastic work that Elenia Grant and others have been working on, which is the idea of nationwide sweeps of hybrid energy systems. So what I mean by this is if we're looking at where to site some of these hybrid energy systems, and we're able to do this anywhere geographically, we can figure out where the best places to put these systems are. In this case, we're really focused on wind and solar as well as batteries producing hydrogen. Again, I'm thinking about IEA Task 61 and Task 50. I'm thinking this is exactly what we're talking about generally in these tasks. The goal here is to do a broad sweep, compare and contrast across different sites, and see where we are optimally siting some of these upcoming hybrid energy systems. Real quick, before I get too deep into this, I'll acknowledge that sometimes I talk fast, sometimes I talk slow. We also only have 17 minutes left. So at any point, just ping me if I should stop or slow down, or if you want to start asking questions. This is a really fun chart, and again, it's information dense. This is showing the levelized cost of hydrogen produced under different scenarios. What I want to show here is that H2I, as a tool, is able to output financial information at a very detailed level. Each one of these stacked up bar charts shows how different parts of the system play into the total cost of hydrogen. On the left, we have maybe the baseline case is the simplest way to put it, and we can see the stack up of renewable energy assets, electrolyzer capital expenditures, as well as other costs. Then if we introduce different tax policies or capital expenditure price reductions, what does this mean for the levelized cost of hydrogen? We get to this middle bar and the further right bars as well by moving these different configuration scenarios, by looking at how the sensitivity of this system responds to different scenarios. This allows us to see, ooh, okay, if we reduce the capex of the electrolyzer by this much, we get a 39-cent reduction in LCOH, for instance. This is an immediately useful tool to help us understand how the design space looks for these hybrid energy systems producing hydrogen. So I wanted to highlight that this is one kind of capability that is possible of being output from H2I. Next up, I also want to show you that I mentioned these nationwide sweeps. You can imagine there's a whole trove of information, a huge amount of information that we need to sift through and understand. One way to do that I really enjoy is a violin plot, which is what I'm showing here. You can think about it as a box and whisker plot, but with a little bit more detail. What we wanted to see on the x-axis was, as we varied the electrolyzer capex, what does this mean for the LCOH produced? Now, I mentioned that we're doing nationwide sweeps here. Each one of these plots, each one of these violins, if you will, is a collection of more than 50,000 sites that we've conglomerated into a single plot here. It allows you to see the spread and distribution of these different areas and where it makes sense to invest in these hybrid systems. We can see that the capex obviously has a great effect on the LCOH produced, but also appreciate from the shape of these plots that the median case in the US has certain results. In the case of capex being $2,000 per kilowatt, the median case is about $6.50 for LCOH. You can see that the most extreme case, the cheapest place to produce it, in this case in southeastern Wyoming, is about $4.11. So this helps you see the spread of these different sites that are producing this hydrogen, as well as understanding where it makes sense to actually place them. Now, I want to get to, frankly, some very exciting graphics here. We've taken these more than 50,000 cases and aggregated them into an interactive visualization tool. I will show you some screenshots from this as well as some capabilities. And before you ask, I'll acknowledge it's not publicly facing yet, but we're seeking approval from DOE to release it. And I think we're very, very close to that. So I'll keep you posted. I'm excited to share this with the world. All that being said, let's talk about what we can see here. This interactive viz tool is a map of the US with each one of these sites plotted onto it. It allows you to interactively look at the levelized cost of hydrogen across many different sites. You're able to look at different scenarios, and I'll highlight some of those here. You're also able to look at not just the LCOH for hydrogen, but the LCOE as well for the renewable systems producing the electricity feeding into the hydrogen. I also mentioned this before, but we have the idea of produced versus delivered. If you're just producing the commodity versus delivering it via cables, pipelines, or tanker trucks, you're going to have a different cost. So we also account for that and can showcase results for that. Let's also talk about the other capabilities in this interactive viz tool. It's interactive for a reason. On the top right, we have a legend with a slider, and you can filter different cases. So let's say you're only interested where hydrogen is below a certain price. You're able to filter that and then look at where that is, and you're able to zoom into that site and see the details of the hybrid energy system. You're also able to overlay different data layers. You might be thinking about, ooh, what if my electrolyzer was powered by nuclear energy? What would that look like? Where are there nearby nuclear plants? Or maybe you're thinking about storing some of your hydrogen in different geologic features like lined rock caverns. We have the ability to overlay where these data sources are geographically to help inform the decision making behind developing these hybrid systems. I also mentioned this, there are different scenarios and different toggles you can switch on and off to better understand the design space. The importance of policy comes to mind. You can choose between no policy, max policy, and everything in between to better understand how those affect the cost of hydrogen produced as well. Now, this is a really neat feature that our colleague JD Lawrence Chasen put together, and it's the ability to zoom in to the map and mouse over a certain site and get much more detailed information. So H2I is outputting all of this information. We're able to visualize it and then also interactively process it as well. What I'm showing here is a histogram plot of different LCOH values, and it shows all the different scenarios that we considered for one of these 50,000 sites. And it allows you to see how the LCOH varies. If you click on one, you can see the details for the plant size as well as the different scenario conditions. Really nifty results. And then lastly, for the viz tool that I want to highlight is the idea of the comparison mode. You're able to look at different scenarios on the left and right side and then show them side by side or even do a split screen to understand how these different scenarios affect the results and the cost of hydrogen produced at these different sites. So I glossed over a lot of the details. I'm excited for you to be able to see this soon, but not quite yet. And then this is another kind of one-stop shop for a slide where the world is our oyster. I want to highlight all the different options that we have available. I've been showing you wind solar battery producing hydrogen. I'm not going to say that's been done before, but it has. Let's talk about some other ways of looking at hybrid energy systems that could be more exciting, more varied, and maybe even less well understood. So we could be talking about offshore energy systems. And in this way, we could be looking at offshore energy systems that are producing fuels for ships or fuels for a wide array of purposes. Additionally, this opens up the idea of using wave energy converters, hydrokinetic turbines, many different other energy production sources. The goal of H2I is to be able to allow us to input these different systems, these different modules, combine them together intelligently, and do some of these complex design problems. I've been talking a little bit more with the offshore wind group as well as the meteorology group and what this means for some of our work. And frankly, it's overwhelming with how cool and how varied a lot of the work can be. I mentioned all these great people. Look at them. These are fantastic folks on the team. We're all working together day in and day out to help code and guide some of the research here. And this is only a subset. It's not everybody because there are so many folks that contribute positively to the team. I can't stress enough, it's not just me. I would be crazy to say it's just me. It's many, many more people. All that being said, thank you. I would love to take some questions. And if you're interested, make sure to check out H2Integrate.